Are you ready for test 2-1? Well, if not, watch this video. So when you come in on test day, I'm going to hand out a piece of paper that looks like this. On the top of it, you're going to have your sum and difference formulas that I told you I'd give you. And there's going to be a blank unit circle to fill in if you want. You do not have to fill this in. It's just an option. Some people wanted it. On this sheet of paper, you can write anything else you want. And then at the very end, you're going to staple this to the back of your answer sheet. Failure to staple this to the back of your answer sheet will result in a 0. I have to have this paper back. So if it were me, I would walk in, I would sit down, and I'd start filling in my circle, and then I would add my 8 identities that I'm supposed to have memorized, anything about sine, cosine, and tangent inverse that you wanted, and maybe your x, y, r information. So this is what my circle looks like, and I made it big so that it would show up on here better. My circle, first thing I did was I went and labeled all my degrees, I labeled all my radians, I labeled all my ordered pairs, and then out here to the side I went ahead and put my tangents so they're there if I needed them. At the bottom of my paper, I added my 8 identities that I have to have memorized. I did my 2 quotient identities, my 3 reciprocal identities, and my 3 Pythagorean identities. Over here on the side of my paper, I went and reminded myself that if it's not on the unit circle, I'm going to use an x, y, r problem, which means I'm going to do x squared plus y squared equals r squared. I put a reminder that sine is y over r, cosine is x over r, and tangent is y over x. Over here to the right, I reminded myself that if I have a sine inverse problem, I'm going to be in quadrants 1 and 4. If I have a cosine inverse problem, I'm going to be in quadrant 1 and 2. And if I have a tangent inverse problem, I'm also going to be in quadrants 1 and 4. And then once you have that filled out, you can use it as you're working your test. So I'm going to work a couple of problems from the review sheet, not all of them. And at the very end, I will show you the answer key so you can go back and check any that I don't do with you. So the first 3 things on the that I want to make sure that you understand is that when you're doing the inverse problems, there are only certain quadrants that you can get your answers out of, which means you have certain ranges. So for sine inverse, I can only be in quadrant 1 and 4. So I can only be between negative pi over 2 and positive pi over 2. So I'm going to write my range as negative pi over 2, comma, positive pi over 2. Cosine inverse can be in either quadrant 1 or 2. Quadrant 1 is at 0 radians. Quadrant 2 is at pi radians. So my range is going to go from 0 to pi. Tangent inverse is the exact same as sine. It can only go in quadrants 1 or 4. So again, it can only be from negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2. And you have to know this information in order to answer the questions on 7 through 26. So I'm just going to do a few from each row and make sure you understand it. So on number 10, they want to know cosine inverse of negative 1/2. Because it says cosine inverse, I'm only thinking about quadrants 1 and 2. So here's my circle. I'm thinking about quadrants 1 and 2. And I'm trying to figure out where in quadrant 1 and 2 is the x, because it says cosine, a negative 1/2. So I know my x's are negative really in quadrant 2. So where in this quadrant is my x a negative 1/2? My x is negative 1/2 right here at 2 pi over 3. So the answer is 2 pi over 3. So if you have your unit circle filled out, it makes it super easy. Number 11 wants to know where is tangent inverse radical 3 over 3. Well, I know tangent inverse is only in quadrants 1 and 4. And then I go look at my circle, and I know, because I've labeled my circle, that tangent is root 3 over 3 at pi over 6. So the answer is pi over 6. Number 12 is another cosine inverse problem. So because it says cosine inverse, I'm looking at quadrants 1 and 2. They want a negative radical 2 over 2. Because they want a negative, I'm going to focus in quadrant 2 again. So I'm looking for negative radical 2 over 2, which is right here at 3 pi over 4. My answer is 3 pi over 4. Number 17 is a sign problem. So sign means I'm going to be in quadrant 1 or 4. It's a positive root 2 over 2. My y's are positive in quadrant 1. And I'm looking for root 2 over 2, which is right here at pi over 4. My answer is pi over 4. Number 19 says sine inverse again. So I'm looking in quadrants 1 and 4. It says of a negative 1/2. I know signs are negative in quadrant 4. So now I'm looking in quadrant 4 for negative 1/2. It's right here at 11 pi over 6. Okay, caution, error alert. When you're doing sine inverse, I'm not allowed to call this 11 pi over 6. I have to call it its negative name. So it's really 11 pi over 6, or I can also call that same spot a negative pi over 6. Okay. 21 is a double problem. So when we have these that are written double, we do the inside first, and then we do the outside. So it's a sine inverse of 5 over 13. It's a positive. So I'm thinking, where in quadrant 1 does my y value equal 5 over 13? And this is when we say, hey, it's not on the circle. And whenever I say, hey, it's not on the circle, it's an XYR problem. So this is the strategy I'm going to use. So if it's an XYR problem and they give me sine, they just gave me the y and the r. And I'm going to go find my x using x squared plus y squared equals r squared. So x squared plus y squared equals r squared. If I subtract those, I get 144, and the square root of 144 is 12. So that's the inside. And the outside wants me to find cosine. In order to find cosine, I need to use the x and the r. So I simply put the x over the r, and we're done. Let's go look at 23. 23 is cosine inverse, so I'm thinking quadrants 1 and 2. It's a positive, so now I'm thinking quadrant 1. So where on the circle does the x equal 3 over 5? It doesn't. It's not on the circle, so we think XYR. So I come over here and I go write x equals, y equals, r equals. Because it's cosine, they gave me the x and the r. And then I'm going to go do my x squared plus y squared equals r squared. So 9x squared plus y squared equals r squared. 25 take away 9 is 16, and the square root of 16 is 4. 3, 4, 5. That's the inside. The outside asks me to find tangent. Tangent requires the y over the x, so I put the 4 over the 3, and we're done. All right, last one on the front, number 25. I do the inside first. Sine inverse means I'm in quadrant 1 and 4, and it says root 2 over 2. Because it's positive, I'm looking in quadrant 1. And hey, it's actually in here. It's on the circle, so this is not an XYR. On the circle, I know that sine is root 2 over 2 at pi over 4. So the inside answer is pi over 4. And now I'm going to go do the outside. It says take tangent of pi over 4. So I go look at my circle because I wrote it down. At pi over 4, tangent equals 1. Okay, so what you want to do now is pause the video, go see if you can work the other ones. I'm going to show you the answer key. Check your answers. Number 7 should be negative pi over 3. Number 8 is pi over 6. 9 is pi over 6. 10 is 2 pi over 3. 11 is pi over 6. 12 is 3 pi over 4. 13 is negative pi over 4. 14 is negative pi over 6. 15, negative pi over 3. 16 is pi over 4. 17 is pi over 3. And 18 is pi over 3. Number 19 is negative pi over 6. 20 is 12 over 5. 21 is 12 over 13. 22 is 4 over 5. 23 is 4 over 3. 24 is root 3 over 2. 25 is 1. And 26 is negative square root of 3. so I'm going to turn the page. Now I've got 27 through 45, and on 27 through 45, this is when you need to know your 8 identities. So if you already have these down here written down, it'll make it a lot easier. If you don't have them written down, that's fine. So sine over x, I already wrote that down. That's my tangent of x, or theta. 1 over sine, I also already have written down. That's cosecant. 29, it says sine squared plus cosine squared. Hey, that's my Phineas and Ferb. I know that equals 1. Cosine over sine, I have that written down already. That's cotangent. So again, if you have these already written on the bottom of your paper, it makes it super easy. 1 plus tangent squared is I tan in a second. Make sure that you're picking the one that says squared. Don't pick secant squared. I cut cheesecake, so because it's a squared, make sure you don't pick just cosecant, pick cosecant squared. Okay, then I've got 1 over cosine, that's also already on my paper. Wow, I got all of these right just by writing these on my paper before I started. Now, 35 and 37 are on your paper, but they're tricky. So on 35, it says 1 minus sine squared x. What they did is they took this Phineas and Ferb and they moved things around. So if I were to take this sine squared and move it over, then I would have 1 minus sine squared. And what would be left over here? Cosine squared. They did the same thing on 37. They wanted to write 1 minus cosine squared, so they kicked that cosine squared over by writing a minus, and that left me with a sine squared. And you can do that for secant squared, I tan in a second. You can also do that for I cut cheesecake. So there's some more down here for you to try. On 41, they want me to actually go multiply. You did something like this on your assessment. So it says sine theta times, I'm going to change secant to be 1 over cosine theta. And now I'm going to put my sine over 1. I'm going to multiply top times top. And I'm going to multiply bottom times bottom. And now I see one of my identities, sine over cosine, is really just tangent. Okay? And you're going to do the same thing for 42. I'll let you try that in a second. 43 is a problem where I'm going to FOIL. So sine times sine is sine squared. Sine times negative 1 is negative sine. 1 times sine is positive sine. And 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. After I've FOILed, I can see that these two terms in the middle are going to cancel. And I have sine squared theta minus 1. And sine squared theta minus 1, you're tempted to think that it's one of these, but sine squared theta minus 1, it's actually 1 minus sine squared, so it's in the wrong order. So you're actually done. You're going to do 44 the same way. On 45, we've got sine squared plus tangent squared plus cosine squared. And I know that sine squared plus cosine squared is a Phineas and Ferb. These two together equal 1. So I have 1 plus tangent squared. And then I look at that and go, oh, I tan in a second, so this whole thing equals secant squared. Okay, so pause the video, go try the rest of these identities, see if you can get them right, and I'm going to show you the answer key. Okay, so 27 was tangent x, 28 was cosecant x, 29 was 1, 30 was cotangent, 31 was secant squared, 32 was cosecant squared, 33 was cotangent, 34 is secant, 35 is cosine squared, 36 is tangent squared, 37 is sine squared, 38 is 1, 39 is 1, 40 is cotangent squared, 41 was tangent, 42 is cotangent, 43 was sine squared minus 1, 44 was cosine squared minus 1, and 45 was secant squared. Alright, the next page of the review has to do with our sum and differences. And remember, you're going to get these formulas. You don't have to memorize them, we just have to know how to use them. The ones that you're going to see most on your test are the XYR problems like this. So let's go look at number 46. They give me a tangent. Because they gave me tangent, they gave me the y and the x, and they also gave me the quadrant. They told me that I'm between 0 and pi over 2. So when I do problems like this, I like to divide my paper in half. I need an A side of the paper, and I want a B side of the paper. And I'm going to write everything about A over here. I'm going to have an X, I'm going to have a Y and an R, and I'm going to go figure out what quadrant I'm going to be in. So I'm going to go mark the 0 over here in the right corner. I'm going to mark pi over 2 up top, which means I'm in quadrant 1 and everything is positive. So because they gave me tangent, I have the y and the x. So my y is 5, my x is 12. And then I'm going to go do my x squared plus y squared equals r squared. So 144 plus 25 equals r squared. 144 plus 25 is 169. So R is 13. Now I'm going to go over here and do side B. On side B, I'm going to have an X, a Y, and an R again. I'm going to go figure out my quadrant. So according to this, I need to have a dot at pi. Oh, that's a horrible circle. It's over here at the left. 3 pi over 2, down here at the bottom, so I'm in quadrant 3. If I'm in quadrant 3, that means X is negative and Y is negative. They both are. They give me cosine, so they gave me the X and the R. My X is negative 3, my R is 5. So I'm going to go do X squared plus Y squared equals R squared. Okay, so X squared is 9 plus Y squared, R squared is 25. I'm going to subtract 9. Y squared equals 16, so Y equals 4, but don't forget we're in quadrant 3, so it's negative. So that's your first step when you do this XYR problem. Now I'm going to go write down what cosine of A is, what sine of A is, cosine of B, and sine of B. So cosine on the A side is 12 over 13 because it's the X over the R. Sine on the A side is Y over R, so 5 over 13. I'm going to go to the B side. Cosine on the B side is, it actually gave me the problem, negative 3 over 5. And the sine on the B side is negative 4 over 5. And now all I have to do is plug into the formula, and again, you're going to have the formula on the test, so let's see what it's going to look like again. This particular problem says sine of AB, so I'm going to go find my sine formula that says A plus B, it's right here, and it says I'm going to go sine alpha cosine beta plus cosine alpha sine beta. So I'm going to write down the formula just so you can see it. So it says I'm going to do sine A cosine B plus cosine A sine B. And since we found these up here already, all I have to go do is write them down. So sine A is 5 over 13 times cosine of B was negative 3 over 5. So that's the first part. And then I'm going to bring down my plus sign. And then it says cosine of A, which is 12 over 13, times sine of B, which was negative 4 over 5. Okay, now we're going to go multiply this fraction. I'm going to multiply this fraction, then I'm going to add them together. So top times top is going to give me negative 15. Bottom times bottom is going to give me 65. Remember, you get a calculator on this test, so this shouldn't be a big deal. Plus, top times top gives me negative 48. Bottom times bottom gives me 65. Okay, so negative 15 and negative 48 are like terms, so I get negative 63. You don't add denominators over 65. And you do cosine A plus B, sine A minus B, and cosine A minus B the same way. You write down the formula and plug in. So pause the video and then come back and check your answers. So cosine A plus B should have been negative 16 over 65. Pause it if you need to check your work. Sine A minus B should have been 33 over 65. Cosine A minus B should have been negative 56 over 65. All right, let's go look at 47. I just want to make sure you can do the ABC part. Once you have the ABC part done, then I'll let you check your answers again so that you can ask me questions if you have any. So again, I'm going to split my paper into two. I want an A side and a B side. So I'm going to have an A side and I have a B side. On the A side, again, I want an X, a Y, and an R. And I need to figure out my quadrant. So my quadrant for the A side, they tell me I'm going to be at pi, which is over here on the left, and 3 pi over 2, which is down here at the bottom. That puts me in quadrant 3. So my X is going to be negative and my Y is going to be negative. And they gave me tangent, which means they gave me the Y and the X. So my Y is negative 3 and my X is negative 4. I got to go find R, so we're going to do X squared plus Y squared equals R squared. 16 plus 9 is 25. The square root of 25 is 5. So there's my X, my Y, and my R. Now I'm going to go do the B side. So on the B side, we're going to have an X, a Y, and an R. I need to go find my quadrant first, though. They tell me I'm going to be between pi over 2, which is at the top, and pi, which is to the left. This puts me in quadrant 2, which means my X is going to be negative. They gave me cosine, so they gave me X and R. I'm going to go do X squared plus Y squared equals R squared. I'm going to subtract 144 and get 25, and the square root of 25 is 5. Okay, so now that I have X, Y, and R, I can go find cosine A, sine A, cosine B, sine B. All right, go pause the video real quick and see if you can do it without me. So you should have got negative 4 over 5, negative 3 over 5, negative 12 over 13, and 5 over 13. All right, pause the video again. Go see if you can plug into your formula that we wrote down on the top to find sine A plus B. Okay, so here are the answers. This is after you've tried it yourself. So sine of A plus B is 16 over 25. Cosine A plus B is 63 over 65. Sine of A minus B is 56 over 65. And cosine of A minus B is 33 over 65. Slow the video down, pause the video, whatever you need to do. Go check your work. Let me know if you have questions tomorrow in class. Okay, the last page of the review. I know it's like the review that never ends. It's where you have to complete the identity. So what we want to do is we want to plug into our cosine A plus B formula and see what we end up with at the end. So I'm going to go write down my formula. Again, you don't have to have these memorized. So this is my A and this is my B. And the formula says for cosine A plus B equals cosine of A, cosine of B, minus, it does the opposite, sine A, sine B. So everywhere I see an A, I'm going to plug in pi over 2, and everywhere I see a B, I'm going to plug in theta. So I got cosine pi over 2, cosine theta, minus sine pi over 2, sine theta. Now the only one of these that I can evaluate is the one that says pi over 2. That's the only one that's on the circle. And on the circle, pi over 2 is up here at the top, and that ordered pair is 0, 1. So cosine is x. So cosine at pi over 2 is 0 times cosine theta. I don't know what theta is, so I just write it like that. Minus sine at pi over 2, sine is y, is 1 times, again, I don't know what theta is, so I write sine theta. 0 times cosine is 0. 1 times sine is sine. And 0 minus sine is a negative sine. Okay, you're going to do the same thing for 49, you're going to do the same thing for 50, and you're going to do the same thing for 51. You're going to plug into the formula, you're going to evaluate at the radians, you're going to go plug in, and then things are going to start disappearing. You're going to be left with one word. So try them on your own, pause your video, come back and check. So here are our answers. 49 should be cosine theta, 50 should be sine theta, and 51 should be cosine theta. I hope this helped you review for your test. Good luck. Study hard. I'll see y'all on Friday for the big day. Good luck.